The race car is getting some much needed love today. Have you guys ever just thought back on something you did and you're just like, wow, I am a complete idiot? Well, that's the situation I'm in. Ever since I installed the Stoptech big brake kit on this car, I've just been running the pads that came with the kit thinking they were the race pads. Well, unfortunately, I technically bought their street kit, so it came with street pads. So for the last few events, I've been wondering why the brakes weren't feeling all that great. Luckily, at the last event at Autobahn, Peter, the guy with the blue BRZ, you guys may have seen the video I did covering his car, he had an extra set of old pads laying around that just had enough life left for me to run them for that one event. So we tossed them on there at the track, and I really enjoyed how those felt. So I went out and picked up a set of my own. These are the PFC 11s that we're gonna be installing on the car. I also noticed that there was brake fluid leaking out of the driver's side caliper. I'm running the Type 200 fluid, so I don't know if I'm just boiling it over or what, but we're gonna be doing a flush with some Castrol SRF. A bunch of people tell me how good this stuff is, so I figured we'd try it for ourselves. And because I'm doing this by myself, we're gonna be using a Motive power bleeder. This is the first time I'll be using this. I've always just used 2 people to bleed the brakes, so I'm curious to see how much easier this is gonna make it. So let's get the car up in the air, get the wheels off, we'll swap out the pads, and then flush the fluid. Now, before you guys flame me for having my tires rotating the wrong way, that was intentional. We flipped them at the track to help even out the wear as much as possible until I could get home and actually have them rotated. It really doesn't matter unless it's raining anyway. With most big brake kits, it's super easy to change out pads. We just need to remove this one bolt here. And we'll pull this out. Now we can pull the pads out. Most likely you're gonna have to press the pistons back in, make sure your cap on the brake fluid reservoir is open and it doesn't overflow because you're essentially just pushing the fluid back into the reservoir. And once those are pushed back, we should be able to install the new pads. Perfect. We'll get this reinstalled. And then get this tightened down, and we'll move to the other side. We're getting ready to do the passenger side, but here's why you want to keep an eye on that brake fluid reservoir, because we pressed in the pistons on the driver's side and I started to on the passenger side. This is past the full mark. So what we're gonna do is take a turkey baster and suck out as much of this fluid as we can before we get started on the passenger side. Now this is a ghetto method, but if you have something that can actually extract this fluid from out of the reservoir, obviously go ahead and use that. All right, we've got it down to below the max line. It's close to the min line. I'm pretty comfortable pressing in the pistons on the passenger side with it at this level. I don't think it's gonna overflow, so we can go ahead and get started. Same thing over on the passenger side. We'll take this bolt off. I'm gonna use the old pads to press the pistons back in. And then we can slide the old pads out. We'll slide the new pads in. There we go. And it's as easy as that. Taking a look at the old pads, they were certainly getting down there. I'm really glad I ended up picking up a new set instead of trying to get another event out of these. We've got pads installed on both sides, so now we can flush the brake fluid. If you look on the driver's side caliper here, you can kind of see a trail of fluid coming out of the nipple and coming down. So that's what I want to avoid with this new fluid. Hopefully we don't see that happen once we're out on the track with the Castrol SRF. All right, so here's how the Motive Power Bleeder works. We're gonna fill this with our new Castrol fluid, connect the cap to the brake fluid reservoir, and then we'll pump this up to pressurize it, and that basically eliminates having to have someone in the car pressing the brakes. So when I just crack open the bleeder valves on the calipers, the fluid should just automatically start coming out, and it, in theory, should be super easy. We'll unscrew the cap and fill this up with our liquid gold. Try not to spill this everywhere. Reinstall the cap and we can head over to the car. So now we'll get this cap installed onto the reservoir. Make sure it's locked. And then we can pressurize the system. We're gonna pump this up to about 10 to 15 PSI. Now we can go to town with the bleeder valves. We're gonna start with the corner furthest away from the brake fluid reservoir, which in our case is the passenger side rear. Go ahead and take the rubber cap off of the bleeder valve. For the stock brakes, you're gonna need a 10mm wrench and then some kind of hose and container. Again, we're just using a ghetto setup with a Gatorade bottle and some clear hose. But get the wrench on there and get the hose on there, and then you can crack open that valve and the fluid should start coming out. And yeah, you go from there. And periodically while you're doing this, make sure to check the reservoir to make sure it isn't going dry, and to pressurize that power bleeder if you're using one of those. This is certainly easier than telling someone to pump the brakes and opening and closing the valve. I've got a decent amount of fluid out of this corner and there's no more bubbles coming out, so we're gonna close off the bleeder valve and take a paper towel and take the hose off, and then we can move on to the next corner. We've got the driver's side rear next, and then we'll move to the passenger front and finish off with the driver front. Now, it can be kind of challenging to know when to stop, but if you pay attention to the fluid that's coming out of the bleeder valve, old fluid usually has a darker kind of tea-like tint to it. So it's like a dark tea, and the new fluid usually is more clear and clean. There are some fluids that are different colors, but I think there's a regulation now where all the fluids are the same, but we used to use blue fluid and switch ever so often so that it's super easy to know when to stop. But now you kind of just have to pay attention and wait until you get that clear fluid coming out. So yeah, right now the fluid that's coming out kind of has like a tint where you didn't drink enough water and you just peed. So you're just waiting for it to clear up and then you'll know when to stop and move on to the next corner. It also helps to stop and dump the bottle you're using so you can see the fluid coming out more clearly so it doesn't mix with the old fluid. So now I can see the fluid that's coming out is a lot more clear than that golden yellow stuff that we had in here. So we're done with this corner. We're gonna move to the front right side. For the front of the car, it's a little bit different because we've got two bleeder screws, one on the outside and one on the inside. So we're gonna just start with one and then move to the inside, and then we'll jump over to the driver's side. This also uses an 11mm wrench instead of the 10. But that's gonna depend on what kit you have. This side is looking good, so we'll move to the inside. All right, that one's good as well, so we'll tighten this up, and then we can move on to the last corner. This corner shouldn't take much at all because it's the closest to the reservoir, so there's not that much line going to this. Again, we're gonna start with the outboard and work our way in. All right, that's looking pretty clear, so I'm happy with that. We'll tighten the outboard bleeder valve, and then last one. All right, I think that is gonna do it. Now that we're done, we'll release the pressure by just unscrewing the pump cap. And then we can take the cap off the reservoir, try and get the fluid out of the line so it doesn't leak everywhere. Okay, we've got the reservoir filled up, so I'll replace the little filter and the cap, and we should be good to go to get the wheels back on here and go bed in those brake pads. And that's gonna do it for today, guys. The car is ready for the rest of the year. I'm excited to actually have good functioning brakes. The Motive Power Bleeder worked wonders. I should have picked one up a long time ago. It made it a whole lot easier. If you guys wanna pick up one for yourself, I'll leave a link down in the description. Let me know what you guys think. As always, if you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.